Hi, friends. Welcome to tonight's live chat. I see you guys signing in a little at a time, and I'm sure you guys will continue to sign on. Hopefully, you can hear me. There's no audio issues. Elizabeth, hello. Good to see you again tonight. I also see Deborah Lancaster, and she is a new member to the channel. So, Deborah, if you're going to be with us tonight, thank you so much for being a member. I really appreciate that. Let's go ahead and get started. I don't see any issues thankfully, with Instagram. So we might as well go ahead and get started. So let me introduce this topic to you guys just a little bit. The topic of counter-dependency. It is really a complicated topic because a lot of people only know the terms of trauma bonding. They only know the terms of codependency. I'm trying to think of the other Stockholm syndrome. We know those kind of terms because we hear them all the time. But what about those terms that describes the dynamic, often within a relationship or within a family, that involves really being uninterested or disinterested in needing other people? What about that term? And so I thought, well, we need to talk about this just a little bit and some of the processes that we can go through in relationships and within our mind and our heart and our soul, as we are in a relationship. So we will jump into that. I'm going to break down some new terms for you. We're going to talk about the spiritual component, the existential component of being counter-dependent and what that actually looks like and how it plays out in our lives. Now, let me say the definition for counter-dependence is really interesting because there's a variety of research articles, blog posts, websites that focuses on counter-dependency, but it's used either interchangeably with traumatic bonding, sometimes codependency. It looks like it's a misunderstood term online, not everywhere, but the few articles that I pulled up, it looks to be that way. So I'm going to clarify what this actually means. Okay, guys. Then we're going to talk about the common issues that you may experience, how kind of becoming a victim to this mindset can impact you in the long term. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of research. Okay, guys. So let's jump in. I see you guys are signing on. So good to see all of you. I think we're okay. So let's start with the definition of counter-dependence. What is that? I had a client last week say to me, Tamara, why do you bring up all these terms I've never heard of before? And so that's now a new joke between she and I. So let me define what counter-dependence is. When you look at the term counter-dependence, if you are anything like me, the first thing you probably thought you saw was codependency, because that's what I thought years ago in college when I was beginning to study psychology. I was in a college class on psychopathology and mental illness and how to diagnose and how to do assessments. And that class was pretty heavy. And the number one term that we learned about was counter-dependence. And I could have sworn at the time I saw codependence. Counter-dependence, I want you to think of it this way. Counter-dependence is the exact opposite of codependency. It's the exact opposite of codependency. Counter-dependence is really an excessive need to be independent. It's the I don't need you to help me, right? It's the pushing that person away because I can do this on my own. It's I have been in a very traumatic, emotionally damaging, psychologically threatening series of relationships, life experiences that causes me to draw the line. And I've learned over time, this is the person who is experiencing counter-dependency. I've learned over time that I'm going to be disappointed. I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to be minimized. I'm going to be unheard. And I'm going to be misunderstood. So because of all of those experiences, you stay over there and I'll stay right where I'm at. Don't come any closer because I may get violent. I may start yelling and screaming. I may set a really strong boundary. I may block your number. I may block your text messages. I may screen my phone calls because I don't want to get any closer. An excessive need for independence. The key word for counter-dependency is fear. Fear. And you're going to learn some different existential terms tonight as well. But it really is fear-based. I have had all of these experiences back here in my past, and because of that, I've learned how to fight for myself. But part of fighting for myself is somewhat toxic because I have an excessive need to be independent. I have a refusal of emotional attachment. I have the experience of refusing emotional attachment. I also have a maladaptive dependency. I don't want to become dependent because that puts me in a state of vulnerability that opens up the door for possible disappointment, opens up the door for possible pain and suffering even further than I have in the past. And so therefore, you stay over there and I'll stay over here. Or you might say, I'm going no contact because I can no longer deal with the emotional turmoil that I feel being in a relationship with you, whoever that you would be, right? Sometimes it's a sibling. Sometimes it's a mom and a dad. Sometimes it's a romance. It's a marriage. I've got to cut this off because it isn't healthy. When I look at the research, the term counter-dependency is defined as a very complex dynamic and a very complex emotionally rooted issue of childhood. Isn't that interesting, guys? It's a complex and emotionally rooted problem of childhood. And it starts with mom and dad. You guys know from being with me for a few years, and for those of you who have been, for lack of a clinical term, ride or die, okay, fans of the channel, you guys know from day one that I used to say, and I still do, that parents are the most important piece of the puzzle. Parents are the most important piece of the puzzle. They are the first people that we see when we are delivered. They are the first people to show us what a hug means, what love means, what affection means, what being cared for means, right? They're the ones who have supposedly supplied our basic needs, right? Changing, cleaning, feeding, clothing, shelter, right? All of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We've had love and compassion and so forth, at least I hope, from at least somebody who played a parental role in your life, right? So the parent is the most important piece of the puzzle. The other thing that research highlights is the same gender parent is the most important in the relationship. A son and a father, a mother and their daughter. That is the most significant bind. So if we come into this world and we don't have that experience starting at infancy, then that is now becoming over time some kind of childhood trauma. Mom was a substance abuser and couldn't be present. Dad was a cheater and he was deceptive and manipulative. Mom never saw him. I never saw him, right? Mom is self-centered. She's emotionally draining. She's abusive, physically, emotionally. She's violated me. I have never felt love from my parents, my family, right? All of those things can turn into childhood trauma. And over time, and especially if you can, and I can actually post the link for you in the description box later, if you can relate to the ACEs questionnaire, which are a series of traumatic issues that has happened in childhood, if you can relate to that, then you have the number one thing that is needed for you to develop, that's a tongue twister, counter-dependency. Just being able to meet the criteria of the ACEs questionnaire is the number one thing that you need to qualify under counter-dependency. So it's a complex, emotionally unhealthy childhood. It is rooted in that. It is rooted in that. Now, let's say, for example, for those of you who can relate to this, let's say you have had a childhood that's been traumatic. You feel like you meet the diagnostic criteria for complex PTSD. And I like to refer to complex PTSD as the relationship PTSD. You know, it's PTSD as a result of deception, fear, emotional manipulation, triangulation, abuse, neglect, maltreatment, right? All of those things are traumatic experiences in and of themselves. But if you've experienced those things over a certain duration of time, then it develops into a trauma and it becomes complex PTSD. Why is it complex? You guys know this, but I'm going to go over it briefly. It's complex because it entails a variety of situations that have been traumatic, a variety of situations that have lasted for a long duration of time, and a variety of relationship-based trauma that has had an emotional and psychological toll on you in such a way that you have never had the coping skills to deal with. That's the way that I define complex PTSD. And so if you have complex PTSD, counter-dependency is something that you may have gone through. And maybe you found yourself in this excessive need for independence mindset as a protective mechanism. And while being in that mindset, you could also begin to experience what we call an existential crisis. An existential crisis. And what that means is you get to a certain place in your heart and your mind where you say, you know what? I'm scared. I'm anxious. I'm uncertain. You know, I'm feeling this lack of motivation for life, for relationships, for people. I don't trust anymore. I isolate. I'm depressive. I'm anxious. And on top of that, I'm going through this period of obsessive thoughts, tons of rumination, tons of fear of abandonment. And I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know who to turn to. I don't know how to talk about it. And I don't know if I trust anybody to even talk to. And that is an existential crisis. I'm in a place in my world and in my mind where these things are bothering me. I just don't know how to get over it. And I just don't know how to manage it and deal with it. And I blame that on my counter-dependency, being so overly defensive and wanting to be detached from relationships and attachments can really take its toll on your mind. And yes, it can turn into an existential crisis. It can also turn into existential anxiety. And that's kind of like this spiritual anxiety of, where is my life going? Will I ever be happy? Will I ever be able to trust anyone? Should I ever trust anyone? Right? Should I ever go back to my family because we've gone no contact? Should I even go no contact? What if this happens? What if I get into poor health and I can't make it on my own? It's a existential anxiety is a chronic state of anxiety. It's a chronic state of wondering what's going to happen next. It's also a chronic state of thinking about what has happened back there, right? And you can kind of get stuck in that. I always refer to it as you get stuck in it as you would in quicksand, right? And it kind of grabs you and it kind of keeps you from being able to lift your foot to go to the next place, right? Because it's so heavy. And I used to talk to my clients about this, specifically my adult clients, because I used to do a lot of grief counseling and a lot of counseling around grief and loss and the stages we go through, and just kind of the twists and the bends and the windy roads that we have to experience when it comes to grief and loss. And I did that in a hospital setting, in a group of adults who were dealing with grief and loss. And I remember telling them, there may be certain periods in time where you may not feel an existential crisis. An existential crisis means that you are going through turmoil every single day. You're not able to rest. You're not able to think. You're not able to process. You just know you're on pins and needles. You don't trust, right? You're afraid, anxious, uncertain, the list goes on. You may not be in that existential crisis. You may also not be experiencing existential anxiety, where you're wondering about aging and dying and being lonely and isolating. You may not be in either stage. So what stage can kind of put you in between both of those stages? And I started calling it existential discomfort. And existential discomfort is kind of like this inner conflict. It's not severe, it's not anxiety, it's not crisis, but you're kind of in the middle of both. And this existential discomfort kind of keeps you in a state of defensiveness, right? You're kind of like on the seat of your chair, wondering what's going to happen next in your life, or wondering how you're going to heal, right? And so existential discomfort for me is kind of the middle ground for existential crisis and existential anxiety. Now, we also have something known as existential guilt. And it's kind of like an inner crisis as well. It's an inner conflict. And, it's kind of like, I'm feeling kind of guilty about the choices I have made, the relationships that I have stopped and ended. I'm feeling guilty about going no contact. I'm feeling guilty about my existence upon the earth because I don't have anybody that makes me feel like I'm needed and loved and cherished. So now I'm starting to develop this inborn or this rooted guilt, this existential guilt that says, what am I even doing here upon the earth? Like, what's my purpose, my meaning? Why am I here? Right? And so you can kind of get stuck there as well. And of course, there's another term that's closely related, and it's called a fear phenomenon, which is really just kind of living in fear of the unknown, guys. And it's trying to figure out, how do I manage all of my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors if I have come from a chaos-driven family? Here's all the topics we talked about in the past 2 weeks. How do I deal with a chaos-driven family? How do I deal with an entitled family member or a relationship partner, right? How do I deal with this jealousy and, this self-deception and also this pathological lying that I've been around for so long? How do I manage that? And that can become fear over time because you may not be certain about where you're going and how you manage these things, right? And so sometimes, depending on what existential phase you're in, and even your spiritual phase, right? You can be in a spiritual phase. Sometimes with my clients who share my faith, and sometimes, with my Catholic and Christian and Baptist and Pentecostal friends, sometimes I will say, to them when they're going through really difficult times, I'll say, remember Job. Remember Job in the Bible, in the book of Job. And remember, he had enemies who were his closest friends, and they turned on him, said he was being punished. This is why you're being punished, right? God is punishing you. That's why you've got boils all over your body. That's why you feel so depressed. That's why you're talking suicidal. That's why you're so despondent, because God's punishing you. And really, at the end of the story of Job, it is not a punishment. It's actually a revelation. And it's a revelation of his faith and of his time and his dependency upon God. And it's also a period of restoration for Job, right? Sometimes we have to go through, my grandmother used to say this all the time, sometimes we have to go through a tornado, a hurricane, right? Before we get to the sun and the warmer days. It's kind of like that. There's what do they say? Calm before the storm. Or sometimes once you come through the rain or the storm, you can have that peace. And so that was basically Job's story. So sometimes I'll bring that up to my friends or my clients, whoever needs to hear it. So wherever you are spiritually and wherever you are in your mind and in your heart, sometimes that is jump-started by counter-dependency. It says, I need to protect my space because I've been too hurt in all of these relationships that I have had. And I've been deceived and I feel like a fool sometimes. And so because of all of that, the only thing I know to do is keep pushing forward, maybe sink into depression for a little bit, maybe allow my anxiety to overcome me a little bit, but I'll find my way. And some people have that type of mentality, but a lot of what I just talked about is really rooted in counter-dependency. It's almost like saying, I've been so hurt and I've been so disappointed relationally with my family, my friends, my romance, my marriages, my boss, coworker situations, whatever the relationship. You may feel like I've just been so mistreated in in this circle here that, I have to bounce back. And some people bounce back being very rigid. Sometimes they bounce back being very dependent, very independent, not dependent, but very independent. And that in and of itself can be a chronic state of failure. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Okay, guys, I want to go to the chat box because you guys are chatting it up. I can see it corner of my eyes. I want to welcome you, see what you guys are saying, read your comments, but then we're going to delve into what happens to you when you're in this space, right? And what does Janaea, I think I have her name correct when I say Janaea and Barry Weinhold, these two individuals have a book on counter-dependency. I posted it in the description box for you. So go ahead, look in the description box, click on the link. Their book is there. They give us some insights on this, and they also help us understand the stages of counter-dependency. So we'll get into that. And then I'm going to tell you how all of this impacts you in the long term. All right, guys, let's go ahead. Let's look at the chat box here. Pink Meadows, so good to see you. Welcome. Welcome back, Deborah Lancaster. I welcomed you at the very beginning. Thank you so much for becoming a member of the channel. Sun and Sunflowers, hello and welcome. Elizabeth, hello and welcome. Glad to see you back tonight. I also see Trying to Figure It Out, Bree. We're all trying to figure it out, Bree, so don't feel alone, okay? Good to see you and welcome back tonight. Oh my goodness, I hit the wrong button. Hold on, guys. I swear, YouTube something goes on with me in YouTube. I don't know what it is. What is happening? Hold on, guys. Bear with me, okay? Here we go. Priya Mason, hello, welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Also, Orlando. Josephine Millo, from Sweden. Welcome. So glad to see you and welcome to the chat. Orlando, welcome to the chat as well. Felix, welcome back tonight. Good to see you. Clandestine Girl 6X, hello. And welcome back. So good to see you as well. Glad to see you. Jessica J, hello. I'm glad you can make it back with us tonight. Lore Fit, Susan M, Starburst, and Jenny, welcome back. So glad to see all of you back tonight. Jenny says, this week I have to go to have my esophagus motility checked, like getting a reverse colonoscopy. Ooh. Jenny, I'm not going to read that whole thing, but my God, I'm sorry. I'm very uncomfortable indeed. Let me just say to you, just make sure that they numb you properly, okay? Because I had a family member who went through the same process, and let me tell you, don't be afraid. You can get through it. Some people get through it and say, you know what? I didn't feel a thing. Some people say, wait a minute, I can feel pricks and pinches, and so just know your body. You'll be fine. I believe it. I believe it. I believe you will. Christine, hello. Welcome back tonight. Glad to see you. As a matter of fact, I don't think you were with us yesterday, so welcome and welcome to the channel. Christine says, I am in the mental health processing that while I was growing up, not asking help since parents are not involved, now with their properties and my brother's same behavior with managing their property. This is a little choppy for me, Christine. Bear with me. Here we go. Okay, psychopathology is my favorite class. Okay, I'm not sure I understand that, Christine. I can try to make some sense out of that. But if you want to bring that back to me, I'll read it again. And psychopathology as a class really is an exciting class, right? Depending on who's teaching it and what the material is, Bossy Truthy 15, hello, welcome. Glad to see you tonight. Jenny says, toxic siblings destroy your health. Won't go on to say what she's done to my autistic brother. Yeah, I totally understand. I know where you're going with that. Okay. Jenny, that's so sweet. I'm glad. That's wonderful. That's awesome. MS, hello, welcome back. So glad to see you tonight. MS says, thank you so much for covering another important topic. I can't thank you enough for going live to help all of us. Oh, that's so sweet. I personally appreciate it more than you know. Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with me. And you're very welcome. It's my pleasure to be able to get on Friday and Saturday and just talk with you guys. Growing up in the world, I wish I had access to something similar. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we need most mental health professionals to be readily available like that, or to offer some knowledge or education that's accessible and free. But that's just my thought. Kim Mathy, hello, welcome. She says, buckle up. Yes, because we're going to get into some stuff. Kimmy, I love that. The Good Glow, hello, welcome back tonight. So glad to see you. Yep, so glad you're excited. That's good to know. Sorry, not sorry. Hello and welcome back. Good to see you. M.N. Odell, Courtney Frazier, and Life with the Lab and More. Hello, welcome back. Good to see you guys. Life with the Lab and More says counter-dependency has hindered my relationships at times because of the abandonment I dealt with. I had to train myself to have successful, functional relationships. Succinctly said. Thank you so much for that, because that is really the battle, right? And that is why most people sink into existential anxiety. They sink into existential discomfort. They sink into this existential guilt and this fear because individuals who are experiencing counter-dependency, they don't know how to just let their guard down. It's almost like this is a defense mechanism that you have put up to protect yourself, but you don't know necessarily how to reverse it. And so it is a learning process. You have to take one baby step and another baby step. And sometimes that happens outside of functional relationships. And sometimes that happens right in the relationship, right? You may be in a situation where, let's say you run into your marriage partner for the rest of your life. You've got to take that next step to see what is going to come of what you think is there or what could be there. And sometimes as you walk with that person, you realize over time, and I know you guys know this, and I have to tell you, but I'm just kind of laying this out for you. Sometimes as you walk with that person further into the relationship and the closer you come together to know each other, then you can find yourself healing a little over time, because you have to, in baby steps, bring down your defenses. And so part of that happens sometimes within a trusting relationship. Now, let me also say, it doesn't have to be a marriage partner. It doesn't have to be a romance. It could be your therapist. I tend to be a very loving, accessible therapist, to where sometimes kids will come through the door and hug me. Sometimes they're excited to see me and they'll jump up in the waiting room and run over and hug me. Sometimes I'll sit next to them when we're talking about a difficult topic, like the loss of a parent, or, being sexually assaulted, or dealing with a hurricane that has destroyed a family home. And sometimes those kids will cry right in my arms, right? So sometimes a therapist can play that role with proper, healthy boundaries, that I am here to help you walk from this place to this place to this place. And so Life with the Lab and More, you're right. You really do have to, in baby steps, walk that path until you can become, safe and sound in relationships again. It really is a process of relearning. There are bad relationships, but there's also good relationships. And I've got to figure out which one I'm in, Bossy Truthy 15 says, those siblings are the main reason that I lost the last touch of relationship with my parents, constantly trying to show my parents I'm this because of their envy demons. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sorry to hear that, Bossy Truthy 15. That's not okay. CBs, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Says, I have to screen calls and have a hard time with trusting anyone since I had to go no contact. Now I try to be careful. I'm afraid of it happening again. Yeah, I understand. That's a process, isn't it, CBs? Yeah. Rochella, hello and welcome back. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Well, here's an existential question from Felix. I'm going to answer this, okay, because it's an existential question. The question is, how do you handle life in a group home or anywhere with mixed signals or mixed messages? And I hope you will give me a good question or a listening ear. Okay, I can maybe break some things down. It's really hard, and I can't really give you a full answer here because I don't know the situation. You know what I mean? But what I can say is I wouldn't be surprised if you have some kind of existential anxiety and some kind of existential guilt, because existential anxiety says that I am in a chronic state of anxiety. Why? Because of aging, because of death and dying, because of disability and poor health, because I don't know who to trust and not trust, because I'm in a situation that I have no control over, right? And also because I've been abused in my past and I've been misused. So existential anxiety in my lap is I don't know who to trust, who to believe, how to deal with changes, how to deal with things I have no control over, right? So you probably have a little bit of existential anxiety. You may also have a little bit of existential guilt, right? That there's this inner conflict of I should be able to take care of myself. I want to get out of this group home and I want to make my own money and I want to have my own private home away from these people, right? So I wouldn't be surprised, Felix, if you're going through those two things. It's hard to say how you can deal with being in a group home when you're in these dynamics. Really, and I'm going to put it this way, just to make this brief and short, I would really make sure that you develop some kind of support system while you're in there, while at the same time seeing if there's a possibility of independence on your part. Can you get out of there at some point? You know what I mean? And what does it take? Do I need to talk to my caseworker? Do I need to talk to my therapist? Do I need to talk to my doctor to see how I can gain that independence all over again? So I hope that's helpful, just based on the little bit of information I do have. Phoenix, hello, good evening to you. Welcome back. Good to see you tonight. Mama Shelby, hello, welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. You know what, Mama Shelby, I already have a ton of videos and live chats on learned helplessness. So I'll make sure that I post it for you, okay? Okay. Bear with me, guys. Ellie Wynn, hello. I can't not say hello to you. Welcome. Glad to see you back in the chat. Kim Matthew says complex PTSD is relationship trauma. I'm getting in touch with how angry I am about the trauma. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't blame you. Don't blame you. Jessica J, did I welcome you? I think so. Phoenix says, oh yeah, you're talking about me and what I was going through for so long, but I'm getting better and better. Thank God. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's awesome, right? When you can, I was telling my mom the other day, because she's trying to walk again. She can stand, she can move her legs. I'm so grateful. And I was like almost in tears yesterday because she's, walking. The right side of her body is weaker. So it was hard for her to walk at all or stand. Now she can stand. Now she can walk with a walker and assistance. And so I said to her yesterday, Phoenix, I'm like, Mom, and I'm trying not to cry because I want to be strong for her, but I'm like, I said to her yesterday, I says, Mom, doesn't it feel wonderful to know that we as human beings, we have the possibility of getting better psychologically, getting better emotionally, getting better in our relationships, getting better in our health, right? That is the hope, that we can actually improve, no matter what a doctor may say, no matter what a therapist may say sometimes, because sometimes they can give the wrong prognosis, right? And so it's wonderful to know that you can improve, that you are not locked in a position of loss, of defeat, right? And so, Phoenix, that goes for you as well, in saying I'm getting better and better. Thank God. Absolutely. There's a possibility of getting better, no matter how small that possibility may seem. Okay. Elizabeth says, oh my God, I have a problem because I have complex PTSD, but don't really think there is help for that in my country. But I think I also suffer from circumstances, not just the PTSD. Yeah, I would agree with you, Elizabeth, just based on our conversation in the past, I would agree. Even if your country does not acknowledge complex PTSD as a diagnosis, just like my country doesn't, I think it's okay if you have a therapist or a doctor to say, look, without labeling this, here's the symptoms I have. I can't sleep at night. I'm on edge all the time. I don't trust people. I feel paranoid. I'm afraid to trust people. I feel like emotional attachment is a complete disaster in my life. I feel like I have maladaptive dependency. I connect with people I shouldn't be connected to. People are drawn to me that shouldn't be. I don't know why I feel this way, but I just feel traumatized. And you can put it in those terms, and it can be documented in your medical records in that way, even if you can't have the label. So you may want to think that through, Elizabeth. That was helpful. Okay. Let me keep looking, guys, before we get back into the content. Jessica J says, doctors have not been able to effectively treat my PTSD and panic attacks. There's no specific medication that helps. Yeah. It sounds like you have what we call resistant panic attacks, resistant anxiety, resistant PTSD. It doesn't respond well. You may have to have a layered approach, Jessica J. And a layered approach would be having multiple treatments that is stacked to help you, right? So like this kind of medicine for anxiety, this kind of medication for depression, this kind of medication for epilepsy, but it can sometimes help control anxiety. Then you may need EMDR therapy on top of that, trauma therapy on top of that. Like it's possible. It's a lot of money and it's a lot of insurance, but you can have a layered approach to your treatment where you have all these treatments that are stacked until you see your symptoms respond. Just throwing that out there. Okay. Sorara, hello, welcome. Glad to have you back in the live chat. Sorara says, leaving a toxic relationship you've been dependent on can feel like jumping off a burning ship into the ocean without a life vest. The fear is real. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I very much agree with that. Orlando says family betrayal is the worst. It is. And I think it's the worst because we come into the world with this preconceived notion that we are loved, we are supported. And as soon as we start gaining some knowledge of relationships and people and awareness of things, like sometimes the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around in there, once we start observing other people, we realize that, wait a minute, this is painful. This doesn't feel right. Mom is abusive. Dad is abusive, you know? And so being in that mindset that family is supposed to protect you and realizing they're not, it can be the worst betrayal. Orlando, we're gonna jump back into the content on that, okay? So here's what's likely to happen with you if you have counter-dependency. The number one thing that I found in all the research studies I looked through, usually for these chats, I pull a few research articles to just kind of brush up on my knowledge and see what's new and make sure that I give you the new knowledge of the field. So here's what I saw in some of the articles on counter-dependency, which was the number one thing was avoidance of relationships and attachment at all costs. And that means turning down that dating partner, saying, you know what, I can't marry you. I'm sorry. I'm not going to take the job. Thank you for the offer. I can't do it right now, right? Refusing to be close to your colleagues, constantly keeping your office door shut, keeping one of those dividers up in your office, saying hello, but not giving much eye contact, not sharing a lot of information with other people so they can get to know you. An example of that could be, for example, me. There's a lot of things that I share with you guys because I'm comfortable sharing it. I feel that it's therapeutic and it helps you to see that I'm just as human as you. But I've learned some things that allows me to support and help you in return. Part of that is the psychology of the channel. So you can share some things in a healthy way while keeping a lot of things back this way so that, you can have some things to yourself and some privacy. But people who have counter-dependency, they're not able to judge that. They're not able to say, should I give this? Should I not? Should I say this? Should I not? What's the repercussions if I share this? And so the thing that seems easier is to avoid it at all costs. I'm just not going to inspect whether I'm going to give or not. That's too hard of a job. So I'm just not going to give it all. So avoidance at all costs. There's also this deep-seated fear of abandonment. It's that I'm afraid to lose. So I don't want to open myself up to this. I'm afraid to have children because I'm afraid they're going to turn on me one day. I'm afraid to get married because so many people are getting divorced. I'm afraid to let this person talk to me because it may lead to further things, right? I'm afraid to have, pets in my home because what if a fire happens? What if they run away? What if somebody kidnaps them? It's this constant fear of being abandoned. There's also this profound loss of trust. And I mean profound loss of trust, and it's really hard to say, come into my space, because you just don't trust them at all. There's self-deception and self-sabotage that is also in here that you could experience. Self-deception says, I'm going to tell myself all these things because it feels better, it seems better, it's easier. I'm going to tell myself all these things. But then on the flip side of this, I'm going to self-sabotage anything that could possibly bring me joy, because I have which this is sometimes, counter-dependency is sometimes called a refusal of emotional attachment. So you could be thinking, I'm going to refuse this situation in this relationship because I don't want to become burdened by a fear of losing this person or us going against each other. So you may experience self-sabotaging and self-deception. There's also strong rejection of help. Oh, no, I don't need your help. I don't need your money. I don't want your money. I don't want your loan. Nope, I don't need you to drive me to work. Thanks anyway. No, I don't need you to cut my grass. I'm going to do it myself. And the idea of a rejection of help that's rigid is and this is me to a certain extent, guys, self-disclosure. Sometimes you're just like, wait a minute, I got it. And you're trying to hold this ball in the air and go over there and hold that ball in the air and then go back here and hold that ball. And everything is falling all out of control because you're exhausted, you're tired, you really do need that help, right? But you're looking really good and you're very convincing, So that's an example of that. That's me all day, any day. Sometimes I have to let those close to me say, listen, Tamara, stop. One night my mom, I'll give you this funny example. One night my mom was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I'm trying to hang on and be strong for you guys. And I'm like, Mom, you're going to be okay. And so she takes a nap and I look at the kitchen. I'm like, okay, let's cook dinner. Let's cook dinner for today, tomorrow, and the day after. Then I'm going to go pick up her clothes from the dry cleaners. Then I'm going to go and do some shopping. You know what? Maybe I'll hit Target and TJ Maxx. I'll go to the post office. I'll go to my office, do some but when I got home, I was so tired, guys. I literally sat down and went to sleep. And my mom was like, don't ever do this again. Stop. Don't ever do this again. Because I literally went to about 1,000 stores in one day. But it's this over dependency, and it says, I'm a big girl. I'm a big boy. I can do this. And everything is just being destroyed because you're burning your candle out at one end, right? And that's not helping you. So there's also imposter syndrome, guys. You could be very, very capable of being independent, but the more independent you become, the more guilty you become as well. And there's a possibility of you believing that maybe I'm doing everything wrong, maybe I'm contributing to my failures. And so imposter syndrome can kind of sneak in there. Other defense mechanisms can sneak in as well, right? Displacement. I'm so angry inside because of my counter-dependency. I'm so angry. So now I'm going to take my anger out on my mom or my dad or my brother, my sister, my cousin, my neighbor, my boss, even though the reality is I'm angry with myself for being so dependent, being so overly independent, excuse me. And so I'm going to take out my anger on everybody else. Another defense mechanism could be reaction formation. And that was Freud's term, reaction formation, to describe I'm feeling a real emotion, but I'm displaying to other people something totally different. I'm feeling so very angry, and I feel the need to protect my heart and my mind, but I'm appearing on the outside to be very social, very optimistic, and very open. So you can experience other defense mechanisms here. You can also experience what we call cognitive distortions. And cognitive distortions are those skewed ways that we look at reality. One very common cognitive distortion is black and white thinking. And that's when there's no gray in the situation. You either love me or you don't. You either want to give to me or you don't. You know, I'm either going to make the team or I'm a complete failure. I'm going to get this job opportunity or I'm just going to give up and just say, you know what, forget it. You know, so black and white thinking, there's no gray, there's no possibilities, there's no hope. It's either win or lose, you know. Other cognitive distortions could be personalization. I personalize everything that happens to me. I know that that person over there slamming their house door, yelling at her husband has nothing to do with me, but I kind of feel like it does, right? Personalization, everything becomes personal. There's also fortune telling as a cognitive distortion. I'm going to look ahead in my mind's eye and I'm going to predict over there somewhere that that's going to happen to me. A, B, and C is bound to happen to me, right? And another common, and this is the last common cognitive distortion, it's mind reading. It's looking at the faces of other people and assuming that they're thinking something about you, assuming that they are your enemy, you know? And so all of those cognitive distortions can kind of keep you locked inside. Now, let me talk briefly about, I think it's Janae and Barry Weinhold. And here's what they say about counter-dependency. They say that there are conditions that has to be met in order to have counter-dependency as a dynamic within your life. The first thing that they say is that you have to have this intense difficulty relaxing. Intense difficulty relaxing. I think I'm talking to myself sometimes. Intense difficulty relaxing. The minute you sit back to take a break, whoop, got to get up, got to respond to that email, you know, or, you know, maybe you're sitting like this, maybe you're taking a nap and it just occurs to you, you got to go grocery shopping. Whoop, time to go grocery shopping. You know, can't sleep too long. I have that to do, you know, can't go to the beach with my husband because I have this to do. Can't go to that fair over there with my cousin because I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to relax. I have this paper to write tonight, you know? And really what it is, again, it's the counter-dependency. It says, this is my defense mechanism. This is how I keep myself in check. And I know it's overkill. It can kind of sound like a workaholic, but that's not what it is. Counter-dependency says, in a nutshell, I don't need you, even though I very much do. I don't need open doors, even though I very much do. I don't need to trust you, even though I very much do. I'm just afraid. You know, maladaptive dependency is what we can call it. The other condition is there's difficulty with closeness. You just can't do it. Don't touch me. Don't smile at me in a cute way. Don't try to date me. Don't try to marry me. Don't try to get to know me as a friend or a neighbor. I'm locking you out. That's it. There's no time with me. There's no space with me. There's no possibility with me. Leave me alone. I had a client that said that once before in session, and she brought her boyfriend, which she claimed was just a friend, although they had been seeing each other and engaging in the relationship like they're in a relationship. She called him her friend. And I remember in a session, she turns to him and she says, you know what? Don't think about marriage because I'm not going to marry you. I'm not. Sorry. And that tore him apart. I could see his feelings were just crushed. But that is her counter-dependency. No marriage. You're not gonna have control over me legally. That's what she was afraid of, you know? The other condition is a strong need to be right. Janae and Barry Weinfeld says you have to have this strong need to be right. I can't accept that I'm wrong right now. I'm right. And it's going to be that way. And if I'm not right, we're going to make sure that this looks like I'm right. You know, that kind of disposition. Some people, not all, some people who have, you know, symptoms of counter-dependency, or maybe I should say traits of counter-dependency, sometimes they're very egotistical. And there really is no reason to be egotistical. There's nothing to show for it. There's nothing to say, you know, I'm the CEO of Kodak cameras or Target. You know, there's nothing there to really cause that egotistical disposition, but that egotistical disposition is like a defense mechanism, you know? Um, I'll leave it at that. I was going to add some more things, but I think I'll leave it at that. There's also a refusal to ask for help. I'm not going to ask you to help me, you know? I have always been of the mindset growing up in the world, especially age 31 and under. I remember being the kind of young person where I was just kind of in this mindset of, if I have to ask you for help, I'm going to be an inconvenience. I'm going to get on your nerves. I'm going to burden you. I've always been that kind of considerate person. But if I really break that down, maybe it was a fear to a certain extent of needing other people. Who knows? I haven't really explored that yet, but you can kind of see it that way. Either I'm afraid of needing other people because I'm going to be, what's the disappointed? That's the word I'm looking for. I'm going to be disappointed, or I don't ask for help because I don't want to be a burden. Either way. Barry and Janae says you have to have that as well. You may expect perfection. There may also be this kind of discomfort with being vulnerable as well. I don't want to be vulnerable. I'm not going to tell you what happened to me the other day. In the past, I've treated clients who have narcissistic parents, and they've grown up into adolescence and young adulthood, and they will never, ever tell any friends, any relationship partners, anything, that they got a speeding ticket, that they failed or flunked a test, that they failed or flunked their driver's exam twice. Holding those things back says, I need perfection. So I have to look perfect. And if I can't look perfect, that's a huge stone tossed in my direction, So that's Barry and Janae. They say you have to have all of those conditions met, before you say that you are a person that has counter-dependency. Okay, I'm going to pause here, go to the chat box, engage you guys a little bit more. Let me turn my heat off, guys. This is becoming a session thing, isn't it? It's like every live session, if you will, because I feel like the last chats have been sessions. Every live conversation, I have to get up and turn my heat off. I think I have undiagnosed ADHD. I just don't learn from my behaviors or my mistakes or anything like that. Okay. Guys, let's jump back in. I'm going to get you in the chat box. Once we talk a little bit, and I kind of engage you a little bit because I see some comments that are really good ones, I will go back. We'll talk about how this impacts you in the long term and in the long run, and then we will wrap up. Kim Matthews says Job was a hot mess. Poor Job. Poor Job. M.N. Odell says it is hard to trust. It is. Because trust is, in a sense, trust is a surrendering, right? Trust is a process of surrender. It says, I am surrendering my heart, my mind, my soul, my full trust that you are going to handle me with care, right? And it doesn't matter what relationship it is. It is hard to trust when you have been the victim of anything but care, right? I very much agree. Thank you, Phoenix. I appreciate you. Phoenix says, this is why I love you, Tamara. You get it and can explain it in a way that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that, because we need that, right? CB said, Job is one of my favorite stories. When things are bad in my family, I always go to that story. Yeah, I don't blame you. I do not blame you. I like chapter 1 and 2 also, because it shows the battle, doesn't it? It shows the battle within, but it also shows that sometimes our hard and painful spiritual and existential challenges are there to grow us up, are there to grow our faith, are there to make us resilient. My great grandmother used to say this all the time to me, that if you don't experience the hurt, if you don't experience the pain, how will you ever become grateful for those times when there is no hurt and those times when there is no pain? And even though some people say, oh, I'm grateful for this moment. Are you? Are you? Right? Because you may not necessarily be as grateful as you could be if you experience some pain, right? So, that's kind of part of Job too, right? CB is that the battle was there and he came out on the winning end, and his gratitude had become much bigger than anything else. Okay. I don't want to go into preaching mode. I'm really trying not to do that. Karen Griffin, hello. Good to see you. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Yes, I hear you. I see you. Welcome. Glad to have you on the channel. Okay, bear with me. The Good Glow. Ooh, from Scotland. All right. Welcome, Karen. The Good Glow says, I have a hard time asking for help from friends and family, but I was the one that everybody depended on. Yeah, that's a good one. Same here. And I allowed them to lean on me while sacrificing my own needs. It's okay to say no, or I can't. Yeah. Yeah. I had to learn, right? So you get to a place when you finally truly grow up and you're like, okay, no, no, no. And sometimes the no's get so good to you. You may be saying no way too much. Nope. Thanks anyway. No, no, no. Nope. Can't do that. Oh, sorry. Not able to do that either. So it is a process, right? The Good Glow. Yeah. A Sweden. Hello. Good to see you. Welcome tonight. Wow, Priya Mason says, I forgot to mention, I'm from Newark, New Jersey. Yeah, good to see you. Welcome. Okay. Silva Waters, hello and welcome. Glad to have you tonight. Okay, I'm just reading to make sure that this is on point. Gotcha. Okay. She's saying, her comfort zone is to just go to work, go home, or not keep plans on the weekend. She says, it's my comfort zone, but I can definitely see myself shrinking. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And consider it this way. Is it shrinking or is it growing up? Is it shrinking or is it getting more real about life? You know what I mean? Because I think we all pass those milestones where we're like, okay, I'm sorry, this is not a happy hour for me. It's about 9:00. I'm going home. You know what I mean? It's about 8 a.m. I'm still asleep. Sorry. I won't catch you until noon. Like at a certain point in life, you get to a stage where you're like, okay, this is not going to work anymore, So is it shrinking or is it growing? And you may really want to ask yourself what you think it is. Orlando, I'm just going to put this up here. I agree with that. Yeah. Santa or sauna? I never can. I think it's sauna. Correct me if I'm wrong. Welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Philomena Elf Alethea. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you. And I apologize. I remember you on here. I'm just mispronouncing. I apologize for that. Andrew Mercer says, great video yesterday. Thank you so much. I saw you in the chat box as I was going back through. So glad to see you in the chat box. Okay. Thanks, Ellie Wynn. Felix. Yeah, Bossy Truthy 15 says baby steps. Priya Mason says, I wish there was a study on family with mental disabilities and dysfunctional families, along with religious trauma. If you went through what I'm going through, yeah, we don't have it. Now, we do have studies on mental disabilities and dysfunctional families. As a matter of fact, if you want, I don't know if it's going to be helpful to you, but if you want, Priya, if you put this comment in the comment section, I can attach some articles to that comment if you want to take a look at it. There's a lot of articles and studies on families where the individual in the family has schizophrenia. And the family can either be a hindrance or a major support system. And so studies on schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, I forgot the other one. I can't remember. Schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder. It almost came to me. There's some research studies that shows that there's a relationship between those disorders and mental disabilities or mental disorders and having dysfunctional family dynamics. If somebody has schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, where, there's this depressive bipolar like component to a psychotic break or some kind of psychosis, dysfunctional family dynamics are often found in those particular cases. And so that's why if you go into a therapist's office and you say, I've been having these thoughts, I've been having these feelings that I'm being listened to, I've been seeing things in the corner of my room, I've been harassed, I've been hearing my name called, I've been told to kill myself, I've been hearing these voices. That is why we continue to ask questions about families. Sometimes we'll say, who's your mom? Who's your dad? Any mental health history? We'll also ask questions like, have you ever had schizophrenia in your family in the past? Has there been bipolar? Because really there's a relationship, a strong relationship between schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder and dysfunctional family dynamics. So if you want to read about that, let me know, Priya. I'll try to locate the research and attach it to a comment for you, or attach it to your comment. Okay. All right, guys, bear with me here, okay? Janine MacArthur, hello, welcome. Glad to see you tonight. She says, I'm really enjoying your live chats. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I'm so glad to hear that. She goes on to say, your channel is the best psychology educational channel on YouTube. That is amazing. Thank you for saying that. You explain the topics so that I understand how to implement them in my life. That's so awesome. Thank you, Miss Janine. I always love your comments. Thank you. Karen Griffith, and I'm glad to have you on the channel as well. I'm glad to have you on the channel as well. It almost feels like a newcomer, and I think you may be, but I love your comments when you send them to me. Thank you for that. Karen Griffith says, learning to honor yourself takes time. That's a powerful statement. I love that. Learning to honor yourself takes time, especially if you are accustomed to self-sacrificing. That's really good. Rochella, I'm going to put this up on the screen. Love that. Yep. Bear with me, guys. Felix, thank you so much for that. Oh, thank you so much. Sending love back your way. That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm so glad. Okay. Natalie Baker. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, keep that in mind. There's the ability to get better and improve. All right, guys. Yep. And Odell is repeating and says, baby steps, just take it day by day. I agree. I once had a client, and he was the cutest 9-year-old I have ever seen in my whole world. He had the cutest jaws. Oh my God. And so when he would talk to me, he liked to stand in front of me and just talk. Or sometimes, we would sit on the floor and play Uno while we're talking about his different thoughts. But he had the cutest cheeks. I would touch his cheeks. He had the cutest cheeks. And so I'm like, what are in those cheeks? Like, what is in there? But he was the cutest 9-year-old. And one thing he said to me, I thought it was the funniest thing. He says, Miss Tamara, I says, I called his name and I says, you know what you need to do whenever you start feeling afraid? Because he was being severely bullied for being overweight and, being adopted, that kind of thing. And in his words, being in poverty, that's what he would say, even though his family was, making a lot of good money. He felt like he was in poverty. So, he and I are sitting and we're talking, and I says, you know what? You really need to keep this in mind, that you don't want to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't want to worry about what's going to happen in a week. And you certainly don't want to worry about what's going to happen in the next month. Keep your focus on the now. And so in this moment, we're playing Uno, we're laughing, right? And he's like, yes. I said, just take it one day at a time. And you know what he said to me, guys? He looks at me and says, Miss Tamara, taking it one day at a time, that's too long. He's like, take it one day at a time, that's too much work. So, but you're right, Em and Odell, baby steps, right? And sometimes it will take a long time. but you got to do the right thing. And sometimes that's baby steps, right? Gary Bennett says, controlling your anger is draining. Yeah. It is important to release your anger. Anger, when controlled, can make you rethink things differently. Yes, it can. Go to the gym, go punch a punching bag. I don't get angry as much as maybe I used to when I was younger. I've grown up. My kind of anger in the past, I think, and I'm sharing this for educational purposes, my kind of anger, I wasn't an angry child. I wasn't an angry person. I'm not an angry person. But if somebody pushes me the wrong way and doesn't seem to have any consciousness or care, concern, or empathy as to what they're doing, then I can feel my anger rise. And sometimes it's kind of like this righteous indignation. How dare you kind of disposition. But what I end up doing is taking that anger, that offensive posture I sometimes can gain if I feel threatened by something. I take that energy and I put it into working out. I take that energy and I put it into excelling my mind. I take that angry energy and I put it into learning the next thing that I can learn. I put it into another educational degree. I put it into a certification, right? And so you're right, Gary Bennett, you can take anger and even the anger that is inside because of counter-dependency, you can take that and say, you know what, I'm going to go over here with this. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to be confrontational. I'm going to take my anger and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to build a business. I'm going to get my next degree. I'm going to get that new car I wanted. I'm going to make sure I buy that home. I'm going to work overtime. I'm going to work out my body. I'm going to get healthier, right? So you're right, Gary Bennett. You can take that anger and redirect it into something much more healthy, right? Okay, bear with me, guys. Jessica J, you're welcome. Yes, you're welcome. Good to know. Lore Fit says, I wish I had known this information sooner. It would have saved me a lot of headaches and disappointment. Well, better late than never. That is so true. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Sana says, I have a mother who is a narcissist. No contact. She's diabolical. Yep. Sometimes that's the only way. Don One says, I addressed my childhood trauma in my medical records. I need to edit my mother from depression to psychopathy. Oh, jeez. Don One, you can't do that. Excuse me. Don One, don't do it. Call your therapist, right? Or psychiatrist and PCP and say, you know what? I'm sorry. Can we edit this? Can we do an addendum? Can you write my mother is a psychopath? Don't do it, Don One. I would just, I'm reading your comments still because I don't even know what to say in response, but I would let it go, if you can. Ashakir Whitaker, hello, welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to see you. One more comment, guys, then I'm going to give you the last piece of this. Okay. Bossy Truthy 15 says, I'm afraid to get into a relationship. I don't blame you. You're my last one. I don't blame you. Getting into a relationship is a lot of energy, right? It's a lot of energy because you have to be mindful of them while being mindful of you. And sometimes it's a welcomed energy, right? Other times, no. So, all right, guys, how does this impact you? Well, denial that you need, refusal, defense mechanisms. That's how it can impact you. Denial that you need other people, denial that you need support, denial that you need help, refusal of help that's being given to you from a loving, compassionate, honest person. Getting wrapped up in defense mechanisms and having a really hard time dropping those defense mechanisms. You guys, I'm sure you've run into those people, who are sometimes, they're walking past you in a public space or, they're in a clothing store looking at clothes on a rack. But if you drop something, they may say, oh, let me get that for you. Right. And they hand you your keys and you guys go your separate your ways. What is that? That's called care for another human being. It's called empathy. It's called concern, politeness, being social. But if you're in this place of, I don't need your help, then you can't accept that kindness, right? I've also seen individuals kind of get wrapped up in their defense mechanism so much that they walk around looking angry, when the reality is they don't have to be angry, but they walk around looking it. And they walk around looking angry because they want to be seen as having a defense mechanism, a wall that cannot be broken down, you know? But the reality is, on the inside, they're lonely, they're vulnerable, you know? Refusal of dialogue. That is also an impact that psychology and I, in my own practice, have seen in people who are dealing with counter-dependency. It's that fear of dialogue. I don't want to talk to you. We're not going to talk. We're not going to open up dialogue. I don't have anything that I want to share with you. You know, have you ever been in a meeting at work, maybe a conference, maybe a training, where you may sit next to someone and they never give you eye contact? They keep their chair turned a certain way. You know, they keep, you know, their head over this way, so you never get a chance to really get a full look at their face, right? It's kind of like they're closing off dialogue, you know? So there's also a fear of vulnerability. I'm afraid to be vulnerable. If I'm vulnerable, I'm going to be destroyed kind of mentality. Yes, that may be true in some situations, but is that true always? No, no. You may also have a guilt complex and a fear complex and an inferior complex. 3 things. Guilt complex. I'm guilty about all the things that I haven't allowed myself to do or have, or I'm guilty about all the things that I feel I should be doing and I'm not, right? Fear complex. I live my daily life in this mode of fear. I'm afraid to smile at you. I'm afraid to hold the door open for you. I'm afraid to ask for that favor. You know, I'm afraid to care about that elderly woman walking across the street needing help. You know, there may also be an inferiority complex. You know, I've been so hurt in relationships and traumatized that I really don't know if I have what it takes to go from point A to point B. There may also be poor self-awareness. You know, you've kind of, usually a counter-dependent brain says, I'm shutting down all of my emotions. I'm shutting down all of my feelings. And from this point on, I'm going to be all about cognitive empathy. I'm going to be all about working with you from a business level, you know, or I'm only going to talk to you for a couple of minutes and then I'm done. I got to go, you know? So poor self-awareness. You may also see rigidity and what we call learned fear. You know, rigidity means you're not very flexible. You're going to keep that defense mechanism up as high as you can. And learned fear. Over time, you can learn to fear things that you shouldn't be fearing, you know? Have so many traumatic relationships, and you feel like those traumatic relationships have really left a dent in your spirit, your mind, your heart. You may slam the door of opportunity for another relationship. And so then what you're doing is helping your brain learn that it isn't okay to trust. Learn that you have to keep the door slammed and closed tightly, you know, in order to survive. These are deep concepts, right, guys? I literally, like I always tell you, I literally just scraped the surface for you. This is counter-dependency or counter-dependence. It's, I'm afraid of being dependent. It's a refusal of emotional attachment. So I have put up this wall, and this wall can be shown in a variety of my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And because of that, here's the impact. And I've tried to continue this, and I do continue it, even though it limits me and my entire life. That's counter-dependency. All right, guys, I'm just going to go back to the chat, skim a little bit more. Then let's wrap up. If you guys want me to talk about the psychology of blamers, let me know in the chat box. Let me know in the comment section. If you want me to talk about the psychology of how to overcome counter-dependency, let me know that as well. And I'm happy to put that into the schedule. Next week, I think you guys are going to really like the topic, but let me know if you want me to add those two things. I can do a video or I could bring it back to a live chat next week. So let me know what you want. Sarara says, I had a really hard time learning to trust my own judgment when it came to people. When I stopped people pleasing, I gained clarity, felt less resentful. It helped. Yeah, that's so true. Thank you for sharing that. I like that a lot. Yeah. Sometimes you do go through that process of, I don't trust my own feelings, my own mind, my own judgment. So I'm going to lean on this person's judgment because it makes so much more sense. And we call that a dependent personality disorder, when your life kind of, it operates on the cylinder of dependency. You know, I'm going to depend on my mother to make all my decisions. I'm going to depend on my husband to make all of the decisions because I'm too afraid, you know? Give me 1 second, guys. Bossy Truthy says single, happy life, right? You don't have to be in a relationship to be happy. No way. I think that's the wrong concept, right, guys? Okay. Phoenix says, this is what I've been giving. This is what I've been going through because I'm trying to separate myself and, sorry, guys. I'm trying to separate myself and regain my independence while trying to avoid getting reattached. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a possibility that over time, let's say, for example, you are really and truly trying to come away from abusive relationship and family dynamics, and you may stay away for a while to build up your strength. And when you build your strength, then you might be able to go back and be a very different person with different boundaries, you know? So keep that in mind, that it is very possible for you to walk away, gain some strength, gain some new boundaries, learn about yourself, and then go back and be a very, very different person, you know? M.N. Odell says, I remember Dr. Rollo May, I believe, saying it's not rejection by rejection that is lied about that causes anxiety. Yeah. I used to follow Rollo May, Dr. May, and then somehow I just fell off. But he did have a lot of good insights about relationships and attachment and communication. Kim Matthew says, being totally self-reliant and independent versus super needy. That's me. Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get that. I'm with you on that one. My family would give you a standing ovation for that because they certainly think that's me. Maybe it is. I don't know. Gary Bennett says, betrayal trauma is the worst. You feel like you were lost alone with no one you can trust. Yeah, that's so very true. Betrayal trauma, it's very hard to navigate, right? Yeah. Thank you, Bossy Truthy 15. Much love to you. Thank you for that. Simone, hello and welcome to the channel. Glad to see you. Andrew Mercer says, it's a toughie indeed. Yes, it is. Yep. Trying to figure it out, Bree. I like that news. I like that screen name. Says, thank you for covering these topics. Tamara wasn't around 10 to 15 years ago for sure. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Yeah. Phoenix says everything becomes unstable and scary. You're right. Yep. Nancy says, I'm a black and white thinker. I hate the gray. It's where the games are played to me. Yeah, I totally understand. Nancy, welcome to tonight's live chat. I totally understand that. And I'm a gray thinker. I am. I'm a gray thinker because here's what I want to know. And I'm just sharing this, Nancy, to get you to think a little bit. I can be a black and white thinker. I can say, you know what? No, you're guilty. So you're either going to do it this way or this way. You know what I mean? Sometimes if I have to deal with parents that come and see me for therapy and they're going through a divorce proceeding, that's the messiest thing ever in the world. But here's what I'll say to them. There's only one of two ways you can go in this therapeutic relationship with me. You're either going to dedicate yourselves as two adults that has made a child, brought a child into this world, and has the responsibility of raising them. You're either going to come together as parents to help your child, or you're going to continue to fight each other and not help your child, and I have to say goodbye to you, because we're not going to do this, this tick for tat, this back and forth. We're not doing it. And so usually some of my clients, my parents that come to see me for the first time, they're like, wow, ooh, she's a straight to the point therapist. Yes, because you're either going to be two adults who have brought a child into this world and support that child, right? No matter how much you hate each other, you're going to be a parent, or you're not going to be, and I'm going to terminate the relationship, or we're not going to do any therapy, because we're not going to put this child in the middle. So I can be black and white in terms of thinking. And there are times when sorry, that's my brother texting me, guys. Sorry. There are also times when I do have to think in the gray, right? Well, this is kind of iffy. What if we do this? What if we do that? So I think I was just trying to give you an example, Nancy, that sometimes you can be very black and white if you need to be, but it may be healthy to also be flexible. There are times I've had to be flexible and kind of be in the gray, Sometimes that's the only way that you can get through life, is to kind of look at the gray. All right, guys. Looks like I'm needed. Orlando says, I've never been able to relax. I feel like I've been working and fighting my entire life, from premature baby to now at 51. Great video explaining my life. Thank you, Orlando. And I totally understand that. It's like a constant battle, right? But as we said at the very beginning, there's a possibility of turning it all around, and hopefully you are. Guys, I'm going to pause here. My family needs me. Thank you so much for being with me in this live chat tonight. I hope it was helpful. It was a very existential, spiritualized kind of a concept and discussion. So I hope it met you guys where you are. All right, guys. I will see you next week. I'm probably going to post a video somewhere during the week, but I'm looking forward to next Friday and Saturday, because I have something up my sleeves. I think you'll like it. So I hope to see you then. Have a wonderful Saturday. Bye, guys.